Okay. All right. So just while more folks are trickling in here, I'll give a quick spiel. I don't know how many people here have heard of Taqueria or have joined one of the product cafecitos, but just quick intro of me, Brian Trejo, product manager over at Home Depot, also the chapter director of the Atlanta chapter of Taqueria. If you haven't heard of Taqueria, largest network of Latinx tech workers across the US and abroad, as Andrea here is joining us from abroad. And yeah, really excited to have Andrea here. If you haven't already joined the community of Taqueria, highly encourage you to do so. Just pop over to taqueria.org. I think it's like /join, but you could probably find the join link from the website. Join gives you access to the Slack community. Slack community is where we do most of our talking, chatting, bunch of different communities you can join within that, of like all sorts of professional and then non-professional spaces. So always really fun to kill a lot of hours just going into the Taqueria Slack. But I'll hand it off to Andrea in a second here. Few housekeeping things. If you do have a question, I think there is a raise hand feature. Maybe if not, you all should have the ability to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll also have a Q&A at the end of the tail end of the prezo here. And we are recording, as you can see. And then again, for those that join maybe after Andrea mentioned it, she might have to pop out really quickly to get a package because Amazon's forcing everybody, I guess, to give a password at the door to receive a package. Makes no sense, but hey, product management. So yeah, without further ado, I'll hand it off to you, Andrea, to introduce yourself and get us going.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brian, for the invite and for hosting, and Taqueria for hosting me today. I gotta be honest, I've always wanted to join a product cafecito, and now I'm joining because I'm doing it. So that's actually kind of exciting for me. I'm in England, I'm in the UK for reference. So the timing is always a bit difficult for me to be able to do this. So cool. So today we're going to talk about roadmaps, which is one of my favorite subjects. And I've tried to condense this into a bit of a crash course because roadmaps is a subject that I think many of us could talk about for hours and hours and hours and hours. So I'll try to do a bit of a short crash course and then we can have a Q&A at the end. Let's see if this works. Cool. So about me, I'm Andrea. I'm from Peru, living in the UK right now, working at AirFocus. That is a German company. So love the remote life. Senior product marketing manager, but I do have a background in product. So I actually do these crash courses for my own team every Wednesday, which is a lot of fun. So let's talk about roadmaps. I'm going to kick this off by talking about what a roadmap is. A roadmap, above everything, is a communication document. It is always dynamic, so it is not something that is set in stone. And its main focus is on setting direction and intent. So you'll notice that there are a few things that I left out here, which are things like features and dates. And that is because that is what a roadmap is not. A roadmap is not a list of features, it is not a list of solutions, and it is certainly not a timeline or a Gantt chart. And we're going to go into this a little bit further. But I like to think of the roadmap as a list of questions. So you have a list of questions about things that you might do or things that you're not sure about how they might pan out. But it's always, how might we do this? Can we do this? I was just telling Citot Lombardo the other day, who's a good friend and also my mentor. He's the author of Roadmaps Relaunched. And I was like, I think my boss hates me a little bit because I'm the person that asks why about 1 million times a day or 100 times a day. And he's like, just 100. Like, so you should always be asking why, whether it's on your roadmap, on your backlog, on anything that happens, always be asking why. That's super important. So a little history on roadmaps. You might be familiar with the timeline or the Gantt chart, and that is what a roadmap used to look like. So if we go back, let's just go back to the 90s. I don't know how many of you are 90s babies. I'm an 80s baby, so I might be the eldest in the group. But back then, even when software didn't even exist, and when we started getting software in CD-ROMs, there was a really long planning process. So you had to coordinate a lot of things before the product even went out and before anyone even saw it. So roadmaps were scheduled, and they look like what we know as timelines now, obviously, because you had to coordinate so many people and so many moving parts. But now that's not the case. So roadmaps look a little bit more like this. So if you're not familiar with the now, next, later roadmap, you've got these three columns where the now focuses on committed resources, so the stuff that you're literally doing right now. You've then got the next, which are for things that might be in discovery, and then you have the later. So the later are for things that you're still kind of asking questions about. But like I said before, you should really be asking questions the entire way through. Never stop asking questions. It's important to kind of think about, when you're setting the structure, to also think about where granularity exists on this roadmap, because that's a question that people ask a lot about. And so when you're looking at this now, next, later, what this is really doing is taking a step back from your product backlog, and it's going, okay, well, if we have all these things that are in process right now, or they're moving along this pipeline, how do we understand why we have chosen to actually work on these items? And that's where this now, next, later comes along. So you take a look at, these 50 items that you might be looking at, and you start grouping them together into initiatives, essentially, or smaller projects. And you go, cool, so we have chosen to work on these 7 tasks for optimization, for example. And the purpose for focusing on this is X, Y, Z. Or the problem that we're trying to solve is X, Y, Z. So you're then adding a lot more focus and answering what, why, and for whom. Those are, in my opinion, and in building roadmaps, the 3 things that you should always be able to answer. What problem are you trying to solve? Why have you chosen to focus on these items, and how they link back to your objectives, and who are you solving the problem for? Are you solving the problem for yourself? Are you solving the problem for your customers? Hopefully the answer is always for your customers. But as per the previous slide, the granularity should really be on the now. So that's where you have a specific scope, you've got designs, you've got your stories. When you're in discovery, you're starting to ask those questions, interviewing your customers, and then stuff for the later you really shouldn't be worried about right now. But you know that those are things that you're going to pick up at some point. Another way of thinking about this, sort of in a different layout, is you have your product vision at the top. You've then got cascading goals that you want to reach. These are also known as OKRs. You then have outcomes that are linked to that. And the outcome is really that problem that you're trying to solve. And then you've got different opportunities that you're tackling. So if you're opportunity focused or discovery focused, this is really how that's going to lay out. So you've got your opportunities, your outcomes, your objective, your goals, and then your product vision. And it's super important to also think about the fact that none of this exists in a linear manner. So other than the now, because obviously these are the things that you're working on right now, but it could be that you're doing discovery on something right now that might be on the next. And then you all of a sudden go, you know what, this is not going to work out for us. And this is the time for you to say that. This is not going to pan out. We're potentially working on the wrong thing. Is there something on the later that we can perhaps grab right away? So again, the roadmap is meant to be dynamic. It's meant to change. It's not set in stone. So then the question is, what actually happens if you need to communicate time? When do you communicate that, and how do you communicate that? If I don't know if anyone here is familiar with, again, the book Roadmaps Relaunch, or with this whole now, next, later modern PM thing, but I am really against timelines. And when somebody asks me for a timeline, I generally go, well, I can't really tell you, but let's talk about, let's talk a little bit more about why you need this timeline. And I find it really important to have constant communication with your team, whether it's marketing, CS, sales, really everybody in your team, starting with the executive board all the way down to support. So at Airfocus, we have sprint reviews where we talk about what we've achieved, and then we have a kickoff to discuss what we aim to achieve. So those are two very different conversations. And every 2 weeks, we'll sit down and we'll say, well, this is the stuff that we aim to do. This is the stuff that actually got done. And so if anybody has any questions around stuff that they need to prepare for, or think about how they might communicate that to customers, this is the time to then be able to say and coordinate, this is the stuff that's in QA. If it passes QA, it may be ready in the next, let's say, 2 weeks, rough, right? But I never, and I always tell people this, do not be giving dates for stuff that you haven't even started discovery on, because that's when you start kind of crossing that fine line of disappointing people or promising potentially a feature that might not even get built in the first place. And so you have to be really careful with how you have those communications. But when I've been talking to a lot of different teams, I've also found that the reason that they want a timeline is because that's usually the only information that they get, right? Hey, this will be done by then. But when you form a little bit more of an open communication around what you're doing, why you're doing it, who it benefits, how it's impacting the business, then those conversations that they need to have with other people also becomes a lot easier. This is a slide that I really wanted to include because it kind of separates and outlines what strategy is versus what execution is, and the two different communication documents that you should have for each. While I just said I'm against timelines, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have one. And you should have one for the stuff that's actually in your release plan. So having a release plan and having a roadmap are two entire different things. Now, if you remember one of my first slides, I said roadmaps were timelines, but they're not timelines anymore. So a timeline or a release plan is a very specific document. I don't know if you can hear the seagulls. I can hear them from here. Life by the beach. But a timeline is a very specific document that focuses on how are you going to get the work done? What's the capacity to get that work done? And how can you unblock those obstacles? And that's what a release plan is for, right? Whether your release plan is a Kanban or it's a timeline or it's a Gantt chart, like that's up to you. And then you have the roadmap, and the roadmap comes before that. So before you give your development team stuff to do, you actually need to ask yourself, do we understand why we're doing this? And that's what strategy is about. And that's what the roadmap is about. So if you've got a vision, which of course you should have, the roadmap then represents the steps that you're going to take to fulfill that vision. And when I say steps, I don't mean a 1, 2, 3. I perhaps mean more like a samba. Like, you might do it in a very unexpected way. Perhaps you might choose this, you might choose that. But it's not a linear progression. And that's something that's really, really important for everyone to remember is it's more like modern dance. You don't know what's going to happen next, but there might be some sort of like structure to that. Now, hardware versus software, this is a question that I get a lot. If I'm in hardware, shouldn't I have a timeline? Well, yes, you will still have a timeline, but guess what? Hardware still needs a strategy. And hardware still needs to think about what, and hardware still needs to think about why, and hardware still needs to think about for whom. So there's no reason why, if you're working in hardware, you shouldn't have an out next later roadmap. You're still going to have that release plan because you still need to coordinate a lot of those dependencies. But it's a very different type of communication that you're having. Now, also remember that hardware is a little bit more waterfall. So perhaps those timelines are something that you should have alongside that strategy. But in software, hopefully we're doing, continuous development and learning. There is also the hybrid that I like to call sprinterfall. And sprinterfall is one of those cases where you're doing the learning, but the actual showing of those learnings might take a little bit longer. For example, in the scenario where you might be doing a complete refactoring of your software, and there's an existing version, but that new version is still in development and it's not being shown, but hopefully you're learning as you're going. Another question that I often get is, what about coordinating with customer-facing teams? So as I said, have constant communication. That's what the roadmap is there for. It's literally a communication document. So try to have conversations that are a little bit more outcome focused. So when somebody goes, hey, when is this feature coming? Change the conversation to, why is it that you want that feature? How can we help you solve that problem? And then use your roadmap and say, cool, so I actually understand what your problem is. It might actually already be on your roadmap. They're just describing the problem in the way that they're suffering the problem, not in the way that, discovery might show is the best way to solve the problem, if that makes any sense. And another way of having those conversations and coordinating with your customer facing teams is to think about soft launches and hard launches. So you're absolutely 100% allowed, no matter what any executive says, to put something out in the wild and not talk about it massively for a few weeks. So put it out there, test it with your existing customers, see how they respond, ask questions, see what you can learn from that. And then once you're, fairly confident that you've taken care of some of those, fun bugs that always slip through, wait a few weeks, wait a month or two, and then do a hard launch and, announce it to the rest of the world. So experiment, test, have a little fun with it. Another question that I often get is, how do you actually prioritize the roadmap if you're not going based on timelines? And that's a really fun question, because I think when people think of prioritization, they think of frameworks and they jump all the way to the output, but there's a lot more that happens before that. And as product managers, or even just as product people, whether you're a marketing manager like myself or in design, prioritization is not a linear process. It doesn't happen once and then you're done. You're always prioritizing as product people. You're prioritizing your objectives, you're prioritizing tasks, you're prioritizing your backlog. Like, there's so much prioritization that happens. I'm even prioritizing who I reply Slack messages to. So think about prioritization as something that's always constantly happening. But I usually recommend, because again, the roadmap is about strategy and it's linked very closely with your product vision or your company vision, start with your objectives. So once those objectives are set, any initiatives that are on your now and hopefully your next should be tied to those. If you're working on initiatives that are not tied to your objectives, you're inherently already working on the wrong stuff. So remove those, set those aside for later. You might then do something called cost of delay. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's essentially going, cool, so if we have these 5 initiatives and we only have the potential capacity to focus on 3, what are we gaining and what are we losing by leaving these 2 aside for later? So that might be based a little bit on some discovery that you do. There's also something called the opportunity solution tree. I know that the people at the product channel in Cafecito in Tequeria are fairly familiar with it. But Teresa Torres, she just wrote a discovery book as well, and her blog talks a lot about the opportunity solution tree. I just realized I wrote a port solution tree, but you guys get it. And essentially it's a way to focus on outcomes. So you've got a desired outcome, TLDR version here. You've got a desired outcome, which is essentially your objective, a desired goal. What is it that you want to reach? That's your objective. You then have potential outcomes to help you get there. And you've got a variety of different experiments that you can run. And that's essentially your backlog. So it's not about saying, this is the right solution or this is the right idea, but it's about saying, of all these potential solutions that we might have, that we could experiment with, which are the ones that are going to get us to that desired outcome that we have. And it's a really great way of structuring your thinking, and also keeping things fairly balanced, and where possible unbiased. I don't know if anyone here is a fan of Shape Up. Personally, I'm not, because part of it is basically saying the loudest person in the room gets their stuff done. I'm against that. It shouldn't be the loudest person in the room. It's not about your hippo. It's about building things in an unbiased way that helps you reach that goal. And then after you've gone through that discovery and the opportunity solution tree and the cost of delay and your objectives and all that stuff, that's when you use your framework. So whether you're a fan of rice or ice or mice or lice or whatever, whatever framework you want to use, that's when you use it. And you use it to frame the conversation around the stuff that you've discovered. I hope that made sense to everyone. Speaking of, how do you actually then select your favorite acronym of a framework? And that's where I have to drop the product manager answer of it really depends. It depends on how well you know your team. It depends on even your industry. It depends on your product maturity. It depends even on who it is that you have to have that conversation with. So there is no right or wrong framework. It really depends on how you're presenting this information to other people. And to really understand that the framework is not going to tell you what to do, but help explain why you chose to work on those items. Another question that I get, how do you then actually show dependencies on an outcome-based roadmap if all you have are cards? Well, this is where you get creative. You can actually just use dependencies. So use things like something is blocked by or blocks something else or is linked to something else or is related to something else. I mean, it's up to you on that one. I like to use emoji and tags just because it makes looking at things and filtering things a little bit more digestible. And I also use filters and focus to achieve that. And plenty of the product road mapping tools out there will have some form of filtering available. Or like I said, at the very least, use emoji to kind of highlight those things. And my last point here, I think it's my last point. I might have another one. There's a very, very important and clear difference between a now, next, later roadmap and a Kanban or a timeline. I just want to put this out there because I have seen certain products that shall remain nameless for this one use the term Kanban roadmap. That does not exist, ever. I see Brian kind of laughing because I feel like we've had this discussion before. A Kanban roadmap is not a thing. It is a bunch of buzzwords put together, but it is not a thing. A roadmap, again, is about direction and intention. A Kanban is about understanding capacity and understanding a very specific progress. So a Kanban is for your release. A Kanban is for how you're going to take on work, but a roadmap is about intention and direction. So I think with that, we actually come to my last slide. So we're done. That was a super quick crash course. There's of course a lot of stuff that we can discuss. So if anybody has any questions, we can go on to the Q&A now.
You mentioned in the beginning of the slide that roadmaps don't include features or I think you said solutions. Yeah. What is like a common one that people include in their roadmaps that you've seen a lot that we should avoid?
Yeah, so I'm going to half contradict myself with what I said for a reason. So the only time that you should have a feature on your roadmap is on the now column.
Okay.
And only because at that point, you already know what you're working on and you have committed resources to do it. So anything that's on the now, let me go back to the first slide, to that slide. So everything that's on the now, there's already specs and there's already designs and there's already stories. At that point in time, you hopefully have already done your homework. And so you know what that solution looks like. Where you shouldn't have features is on the next and the later, because you don't know what it looks like and you don't have a solution at that point. So when somebody has on their next or later something like, let's build a Salesforce integration, cool, why? Like, what's the point? Can you answer why? Can you tell people that you've done the homework? Do you know what that looks like? And that's really the most dangerous part about having a feature on a roadmap is when you say, let's have a Salesforce integration or let's have a Slack integration, right? And people have certain expectations about what that means. So if you tell me you're going to have a Slack integration, then I'm going to be like, cool. So then it's going to sync designs or images, attachments. It's going to sync conversations. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. That's what I'm going to expect it to do. But if that's not what you are designing it to be like, then you're already letting me down because I have my own expectations. So when you're in the now and you have, we're building a Salesforce integration in order to do this, and that, excellent, I know what I'm expecting. But if you have it in the next and the later and you haven't done that research, you then run the risk of disappointing people and then, having the wrong expectations, and that's where arguments happen.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Andrea, this is Isar. Thanks again for sharing. Super helpful. So I'm a product designer and I help, contribute to the roadmap. And I'm curious, like from your experience, where do you see product designers helping best during this process? Is there a particular area that, product designer expertise or perspective really is super helpful in building this out?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say product design jumps in the now and the next. So for any product managers that are running discovery and they're building, prototypes and mock-ups and doing research, the design team should absolutely be involved in that. Again, I'm going to recommend some reading by Teresa Torres. She talks a lot about the product trio and having the design team or the UX research team, depending on how it's structured, to be part of that discovery process and make sure that you're getting involved in understanding what problem is being solved, why it's being solved, and make sure that you understand also how to best, move forward with potentially designing those solutions.
All right, thank you.
I do see a question in the chat. I don't know if Salvador, if you wanted to.
Let me
go ahead. Sorry, Rudy. Thank you, Brian. Hi, Andrea. My name is Salvador Villalon. And yeah, I have a quick question. I work as a software engineer at a company in LA. And let's say, for example, I'm working on the feature and the manager asks me, how much time do you think it's going to take to make that feature? And for me, I'm not sure how to answer that question, just because I know that sometimes when I start coding, there are other things that come in the way. Let's say, for example, oh, I should have been using this library instead of this one. Oh, something changed, now I have to update it, right? And so it's difficult for me just to give them a time estimate. I mean, sometimes what I did last time was that I told them, since it was like my first time getting into the code base, let me get more familiar with it. And as they give me a week, and I'll give you a better estimate on that. But is there a better way to approach that type of question of how much time it will take?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I mean, I get it all the time. So we're actually working on new onboarding videos. And I think every day I get the question of, when is it going to be done? And I'm like, honestly, honesty is the best policy. So just be like, listen, it's gone into the sprint. I'll be working on it however long your sprints last. And now we'll give you an update by the end of that sprint, and just be really honest and be like, this is all the other stuff that I have to do. This might be my main focus, but if there's another fire that I need to put out, then obviously I need to switch context. But if you need to give, or if they feel comfortable receiving updates at the end of every week or at the end of every sprint, which is what I would suggest, establish a process for how you're going to communicate that process with them. So again, going back to my example of when is this getting started video going to get done? It was supposed to get done last week, but last week I spent the entire week putting out a fire. So I just had to be really honest and go, listen, it did not get done, but it's now done. And now I'm going to spend the next couple of days actually doing discovery on this new material. When is that going to be done? Well, I mean, I have a full day of meetings because Monday, as per usual, is, meeting day. Mm-hmm. If I can, with luck, if people are cooperative, I might be able to have some discovery done by the end of Tuesday. But being realistic, it might take a little bit longer. But why don't I give you an update by the end of tomorrow, and then we can, reevaluate this. So just approach it like that, Yeah,
so a lot of communication, right?
A lot of communication, exactly. I think the worst thing is to say, I'll get back to you, or the typical product management answer is, I'll put it in my backlog. And never gets seen again. So constant communication, even if there's a delay, it's better to talk about the delay and learn from that experience and learn why that delay happened than to not communicate anything at all.
And is that like a valid question, I guess, to get asked on, like, when do you think will be done? I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting question just because sometimes
Yeah,
things can happen, you know?
absolutely. I think it's an absolutely valid question to get asked, particularly I think for engineers, because they're usually very far removed from everybody else. But in any team, I mean, again, I get it as a product marketing manager all the time. When is this getting done? When is this getting done? And I don't think it comes from a place of they feel like I'm not doing stuff, but they also want to just, you know, get an update, understand how things are going. So
Mhm.
empathy for what the other person is feeling is really important in product management. Empathy is a skill that takes a lot of time to develop because it's, as a human, as a person, it's very normal to get frustrated and be like, why don't you understand me? You know, it's normal. But sometimes you're going to have to flip the switch a little bit and go, why are they frustrated? Why are they asking me this question? What are they missing from this puzzle that's not quite clicking? So it might feel frustrating to you for somebody to be like, is it done? Is it done? Is it done? Because obviously it is frustrating. But then the question is, have I not been clear about the work that I have to do or the requirements that are necessary to complete this? So just sit down with them and be like, listen, this is what needs to get done. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks, I can get this much done, but let's reassess in 2 weeks. Let's get back to this and we can discuss, you know, about what got done, why certain things didn't get done, stuff like that. So honesty and communication is definitely the best way forward.
Okay, thank you. I really like how you mentioned empathy because that is true. You're right.
Absolutely. I would recommend Kate Leto, Leto. She is an amazing writer, product person, consultant, all the things. And she talks a lot about empathy. And she also just released a book recently about hiring managers with EQ in mind. So definitely someone to follow.
Thank you. Really helpful. Thank you.
Sure thing. KateLeader.com. There you go.
Laura, I see you have a question as well.
Yes, thank you. Andrea, thanks for the information. I feel like I'm hesitant to do roadmap reviews with other teams sometimes because the conversation tends to devolve into timeline talk. So just curious to hear sort of what some of your goals are going into those reviews. And I'm also wondering if that is a time and place to get input on items for the later column as well. But definitely have not been doing a lot of roadmap reviews because of how those tend to go. So just looking for sort of an overview of what you think a successful review can look like.
Sure. Yeah, that's a valid point. So I would say a roadmap review or a roadmap presentation should probably not happen every 2 weeks. That's something that should probably be done every quarter. If that's how you're, particularly how you're setting your key results. So the roadmap review should be tied to the key results that you're setting. Some people like to set key results quarterly, which is totally fine. Some people like to set key results twice a year. I mean, it really depends on the cadence of how your team works. So those roadmap reviews should be in line with the key results that you're trying to achieve and then go, great. So if we had a key results to cut down, you know, the trial conversion time by 2 weeks, and these are the things that we aim to do, what was the outcome of that? And then once you review all of the things that you've done, then you can focus on the things that are upcoming and how those line up to, you know, the new key results or objectives that you might have. So try to have those lined up. In terms of time and timelines, again, you have the roadmap and then you have the release plan. And the release plan is definitely something, or the release progress, something that you should be talking about frequently. Like I said, we have it here every 2 weeks. So we have a sprint review, and then we have the big roadmap company meeting every quarter. So we just go, this is the big stuff, you know, objectives, problems that we're solving. And then every 2 weeks we discuss, cool. So based on those items, how are then we progressing? and how are we doing? And inevitably people are going to talk about timelines, and that's when you go, great, so in the next 2 weeks, we're going to aim to achieve this. Did we do it? Did we not do it? Why? And we keep having those constant conversations about stuff.
That's helpful. It sounds like the release plan almost preempts or might help preempt some of those questions for the bigger conversation.
Yeah, and they're two different conversations and two different documents. So again, the roadmap is what, why, for whom, and the release plan is how fast or what capacity do we then have to actually execute on that. And I don't like people that go, oh, it's just outcomes, because it's not true. You still have to focus on the output, right? But it's two different documents, two different conversations, two different places to have them. Hope that made sense. Cool. Do we have any other questions?
Andrea, I have a question. First, thanks for being here. This is super informative, especially as a new product manager in my career. Do you have any tips or resources you'd share for even putting together your roadmap when you're at step 0? So thinking about, these are the business outcomes that we're optimizing for in the next, X amount of time. And this is where we think our quick wins and the discovery we've done tell us these are problems. So do you have any resources for, building a roadmap in the first place and walking through that with your team?
Yeah, actually, I wrote one called How to Build a Roadmap Everyone Understands.
Perfect.
That might be helpful, but the roadmap book is Roadmaps Relaunched by C. Todd Lombardo and Bruce McCarthy. I always recommend that one because it has so many examples, actionable examples around different roadmaps from different teams, different ways of approaching them. Yes, the Now Next Later is the one that I use, and probably one of the easiest ways of visualizing things, but C. Todd and Bruce kind of guide you through the process of what to do, what not to do, how to link things back to your objectives, and then give you different formats that you can use. So it's on Amazon. You can order it. It's not particularly expensive or anything like that, but that would probably be my number one go-to resource is Roadmaps Relaunched. Brian's just shared it. And also, follow CTOT, follow Teresa Torres. Those are my top 2 people for, discovery and road mapping.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Hey, I'll jump in here. Thanks, Andrea, for the talk. And Brian, this is the first time I'm here, but a little of a curveball for you. So I know that, you were talking about a product manager within a company, you own the roadmap, potentially, you work with a specific product. Do you have any experience on what if you're a consultant company and you work with, clients, and usually those clients, not all of them, but they're used to like, fixed bid. I need this and I need it, by tomorrow, and how much is going to cost. Do you have any experience or ideas or suggestions, how would you have that conversation? Tell me more about what you're trying to solve and why, and how can we, consultants, help you define that? Because we also have developers. It's a software consulting company, but I'm trying to push for products. Do you have any suggestions or experience on how would you approach that to see the big vision and why you need to provide value instead of just give me these 10 features and do it really fast? Does that make sense? Yeah,
I now know why you said curveball. Definitely a curveball. I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with agency work. And it tends to be that agency work is just feature, because you're just building stuff for people and they're literally paying you to do it. You could offer a services package, which I've actually seen agencies do that. They have a special services package where it's we're not just going to build what you want, but we're going to help you build it with purpose. And it's going to be hard, but you're not going to end up with, a product that has a bunch of stuff, but doesn't connect to each other, but you're going to have a product that actually makes sense. So I want to say it's Chop Dog in the US. They're really good. And they don't just build you stuff, but they sit down with you and they have check-ins, constant check-ins, and just go, cool. So if you want something new, let's discuss how this actually fits with everything else. So that might be an approach to have, is either offer it as like a nice product expert package and see if they bite. Or just be very deliberate and be like, listen, we're not going to be the agency that just builds shit for you, but we're going to be the agency that builds a product for you. And you know, do that very typical, is this my target customer, or is this, you know, my perfect customer? But as an agency, I mean, honestly, sometimes you're just in that position where you want to make money. And so you're going to have to be honest and be like, do we just build it, take the money and run? Or do we want to go through that process of, you know, trying to talk some sense into them?
Right. Well, I'm trying to go through let's make sure that we're building the right thing, but, you know, but we're also developers. I'm not one, but I'm like, come on, people, let's do the right thing. But I'm pushing. We'll see. Maybe I'll get
it's agency work is definitely a little bit tough, tougher, because they're both tough. And yeah, I have a lot of compassion for people in agency work, because sometimes they just can't have that conversation. So good luck.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions?
Well, if there's no other question, I'll ask you one, Andrea.
Yeah.
So I was looking at your Air Focus. I think that's the company you're on now, and I think you were in ProdPad before.
Correct.
Are there competitors? I mean, is it the same idea of product?
Well, similar.
Similar. Okay.
So I'll tell you what happened. It took Malta, the CEO of Air Focus, about 3.5 months to convince me to join. So it's not a decision that I took lightly, going from one competitor to the other. There was a company in between, by the way, so it's not like I left ProdPad for Air Focus. But the reason I chose to take the role and work for another product company is because their USP is very different. So ProdPad is a great tool, but they're very deliberate, and really all product tools are like this. They're very deliberate about how they approach product. So Product Board has their own way, AHA has their own way, ProdPad has their own way. And so they're very, it's one of those tools that are very deliberate about their approach to product. Whereas with Air Focus, the difference is that it's more around the concept of modularity and going, cool, so if my process does not fit the process that any of these tools are trying to impose on me, what do I have for me? And so there has to be a tool that's just a little bit more flexible, right? And that's where Focus jumps in, where it's like, if that deliberate way of working does not fit you, then you have a place that grows with you and changes with you. Because even with frameworks, a framework that works for you when you're a startup may no longer work for you when you're a scale up or when you're an enterprise, right? I mean, I don't want to recommend anybody do SAFe, but the reality is that the reason SAFe exists is because there are companies that unfortunately end up going down that rabbit hole. So if you're using, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with hierarchy of purpose, but it's a framework that you use to kind of define what your purpose is when you're in a startup, which might actually be really helpful for your agency work now that I think about it. So check out the hierarchy of purpose framework. And that's really, really great to perhaps constantly revise your go-to-market strategy or your product vision. But once you're set and once you're a much bigger company, you're probably not going to need it. So tools are very much like that. Whether you're talking about, you know, ProdPad or Air Focus, you're talking about Jira or Asana or Trello. The reason people or companies tool hop a lot is because they choose the tool first and they don't think about their process. Whereas what you should be doing is looking at your process first and then seeing if the tool is going to grow and adapt and change with you. Because it might fit while you're in a very specific box, but once you change that box, which will inevitably happen at some point, then the tool starts breaking apart. And that's when you start going, oh, but I need this and I need this and I need that. And if the tool doesn't offer that, or if they don't work with that approach, then you have to restart the whole process again and go through the process of looking for a new tool. So I like that USP of we grow and we change with you. And that's why I kind of took it. I was like, all right, that's different. I like that. It's a challenge.
No, that's cool. Thanks. I was just curious when I saw it. I'm like, wait, I have seen Protpat. Is it the same? So I just got
Yeah.
curious. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, Andrea, quick question. Salvador. I know with all these like product management frameworks and all the things that you can do, how do you apply all these concepts into, I guess, your personal life, your personal development, personal growth? How do you, I guess, make sure that you're always, I guess, reflecting and making sure that the work that you're doing is what you like? How do you, what do you do, I guess, to evaluate what you're doing? And just to make sure you're not getting lost into, okay, this work, but actually work with that I like what I'm doing, you know? It's kind of like a whole reevaluation of yourself, your personal development, personal goals, all that stuff.
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a few different questions in there. In terms of frameworks, I'll be honest, I don't use any of them. I feel like there's a very fine line in using a framework where you go from, oh, let's just use it because I want to understand stuff, to, oh, let's use it to make a decision. And they're very dangerous. So I would much rather just use impact and effort, where impact represents what is the impact on our customers, and effort represents, is this going to be a shit show, or is this going to be like super easy to do? And again, this goes back to understanding your team. If you have worked with your team and you understand their capacity and how they work, you're going to be able to think about, okay, this is going to take design 1,000,000 years to do. Is this going to take a lot of discovery? Like, it's a rough estimate, right? And that's why frameworks or prioritization is always a bit of an art. In terms of keeping up to date with stuff, I am in a few Slack channels. Obviously, Taqueria, I really like Mind the Products. They're really great. Twitter is a great place to follow product people. I've definitely made a lot of connections there. And as of recent, honestly, LinkedIn. There's the hashtags are super helpful to keep up to date with stuff. So I follow product management and prod MGMT. And I think product discovery is the other one. But following those hashtags really has helped me uncover a lot of really interesting stuff. And the last one, just in terms of conversations and learning how people do stuff, Reddit. Reddit has been really great. Avid Redditor right here. I'm on product management, on the product management sub. And it's just been really great to like be able to discuss with other people, and just understanding that there are people that share the same frustrations and the same issues that we do. And what I appreciate about the subreddit is that even as a vendor or working for a vendor myself, nobody sells you stuff. So it's not a place where I can sell to anyone, and it's not a place where someone's going to sell me anything. It's just, listen, let's just share stuff. So I really appreciate that.
And then in terms of you, I guess, making sure that you're, I guess, going towards your goals, right? Is there anything that you use to evaluate your goals, making sure that still you're following the same path?
What do you mean by goals? Goals in terms of what? Like personal goals?
Yeah, personal goals, or your work goals, or yeah, I mean.
Yeah, interesting question. In terms of product goals, I try to set aside every Friday. I have like a housekeeping day or housekeeping hour, really, because the whole day I'm never going to get away with that. But an hour where I set aside for myself and just go, cool, let's look at my roadmap. Let's look at any data that I have to look at. Let's look at, the product backlog. Is there stuff that's in measuring success that I need to, dig into GA or whatever segment, wherever it is that I need to look at stuff. It's my headache last week was segment was broken, so that's why I mentioned segment. But just make sure that everything is up to date, and make sure that I'm on track with certain things. In terms of personal development, that's an interesting one. This is going to sound really weird. I've actually started road mapping myself, just because there are things that I want to make sure that I achieve. But as organized as I am in my work life, my personal life, like my everyday life, is a little bit disorganized. So I tend to start things and never finish them, which is unlike what my product life is like. My product life is very organized, very on point. Like I have folders under folders under folders under tables in Notion. It's so hyper organized. My CEO loves it. In my personal life, not so much. So my new thing, or my thing has always been, I like arts and I like creative stuff, but I'll pick something up and then I'll drop it entirely. So my thing now is I'm going to start a project and I'm going to see it through. But I'm going to do it in a way where I'm testing and I'm iterating. So instead of spending a shit ton of money on something I'm not going to finish, I do it slowly. So for example, I decided one day I had this bright idea that I was going to repaint my bathroom, and about a quarter of the way through, I'm like, I should not have made this decision on my own. So that taught me a lesson about not starting stuff unless I'm absolutely sure. So this weekend, because I have next week off, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get back into painting. But instead of ordering 8 canvases that I'm never going to use, I'm like, let's start with 1. And if I find that I like it, and if I find that this is something I want to invest more time on, then I can order another one and go slowly. So I find approaching things in that manner, like product, right? Start an experiment, see how it pans out. Don't invest all your time on it, because it might be something like where you decide to paint your bathroom and realize you should probably have hired someone to do it for you. How much is your time worth? Right? And that's something that's really important in product is it worth doing? And that's probably the first question you should answer is, what problem are you trying to solve? And what is the benefit that you're going to get out of it? If you can't answer those 2 questions, you probably shouldn't be working on something in the first place. Life advice.
No, true. No, I like what you're saying. Yeah, like the whole just starting small.
Start small. Yeah, start
starting
small.
experiment with it. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes I want to try, let's say, a whole different tool. Let's say I was trying to get familiar with Notion, right? And I was like, wait, I don't need all the things that Notion has. I just want an Excel sheet, right? But yeah, so I see what you're saying. It's really useful. Yeah. Thank you.
Like, don't try to, I don't know if anyone's a baker here, but I'm going to try to use like a Latinx example. Don't try to bake a tres leches if you've never done it before, because you're going to end up with a flop. Like, start with a pancake, see how your skills do, and then, then build up to it. But if you're switching tools is a nightmare. So when it comes to switching tools, I like to have this, talking the spreadsheets, this spreadsheet where I go, cool, what are the must-haves for this tool that I need? What are the nice to haves, and what are things that I can live without? And go through that process with other team members, because at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure Notion is going to go beyond just you. And ask everyone, what are the must-haves? What are the nice to haves? And what are the things that you're willing to let go of? Because it's very common for people to get shiny object syndrome and go, ooh, I absolutely must have this on the roadmap because, the competitor has it. That's just shiny object syndrome. So go through that process where you can actually understand what are the things that, this particular product, what are the problems that this product actually solves for you, and what are the things that you're willing to let go of. And it's the same when you're running a road mapping session. When somebody goes, oh, we should really, build that feature, and go, cool, well, we have these 3 things already committed that we're going to start discovery on. This is cost of delay, right? If we switch for this other thing, we need to understand what we're letting go of. That's an exercise that's really interesting. It's called the product tree game, where you can kind of start going, cool, so if we have this tree and we have these branches that, branch out, grab a bunch of Post-its and go, there's so many things that can fit on the trunk. If you want to add another one, you're going to have to switch something out. So it's a really great exercise to get people to think about, the nice to haves and the must haves, which is something that you can apply also when you're looking for a new tool.
Thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So quick time check here. We've got 3 minutes left. So I don't know if anybody else had a question they wanted to ask. All right. No, I mean, I'm surprised we were able to go through this whole prezo without you having a split to pick up a package.
Me too. Honestly, I'm so thankful they didn't ring my doorbell, because my dog would have gone nuts, and then I would have had to have the dog on me, and it would have been a distraction. But we made it.
We made it. Well, thank you again. This was awesome. Lots of really great questions. This is recorded. We're gonna put it on YouTube. And then somebody did ask if you were able to share the deck out as well.
Yeah, of course. I'll put it up on, I want to say it's called SlideShare.
One of those. We'll figure it out.
One of those. I'll send it to you via Slack, and then you can share it out.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.